Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sending salutations upon our beloved Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This ajiz, fakir, miskeen, dhaif, mustajir, al-muhtaj ila rahmati rabbihi wa barakati begins as always by first thanking you, my hosts, for giving me this opportunity to convey the message of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I pray to the Almighty Allah that Allah accepts these humble efforts of yours in listening to this message, as I pray to the Almighty Allah that Allah accepts these tutti-frutti efforts of mine in trying to deliver the message of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam as it was revealed upon our beloved Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in its true and pure form, without changing and diluting the message of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. My young friends, the last 50 years have indeed been very, very difficult for the believers in every corner of the globe. For the last 50 years or more, Muslims have been persecuted and tortured in every corner of the globe. From Guantanamo Bay in the west, all the way to China in the east and everywhere in between. Who can forget the blessed land of Sham? Who can forget the 2 wars in Iraq? Who can forget the suffering for over 50 years in Afghanistan, Kashmir, Bosnia, Chechnya, Somalia, Burma, and currently, and has been for the last 75 years, the genocide that's been taking place at this moment in time, as you listen to this reminder. As Allah rightly says, ضاقت عليكم الأرض بما رحبت. The earth, in spite of its vastness, has become tight upon us. And why? And again Allah rightly says, وَمَا نَقَمُوا مِنْهُمْ إِلَّا أَن يُؤْمِنُوا بِاللَّهِ الْعَزِيزِ الْحَمِيدِ. Only because we believe in Allah. Only because we've taken Allah as our Khaliq and our Malik. Netanyahu himself said, this is a war of civilizations. And he didn't hide the fact. And this is and has been the reality. Nothing's changed. Nothing will change right till the day of judgment. Naturally, my young friends, living in the West, when we see these images and videos coming out from Gaza, where even innocent children have not been spared, 6,000 butchered so far, and only Allah knows the reality, where their brains have been blasted to smithereens, and their parents are carrying their limbs in their hands, and they can't even bury them because of the constant bombardment. Stray dogs eating the flesh of our brethren. Naturally, my young friends, this will hurt. What adds to the pain is the double standards, the hypocrisy of many from the so-called civilized world, free world, that have been teaching us the lessons of human rights for over 50 years, all of a sudden become deaf, dumb, and blind to the atrocities and genocide that is being committed right before our very own eyes. Not only turning a blind eye, justifying it in the name of the right to defend and collateral damage. What were you expecting, my young friend? Were you expecting these very people to liberate the Palestinians? How easy you forget. Tell me, my young friend, who laid the foundation of this oppression a very long time ago? Salt to the wounds, my young friends, is the silence, the weakness, and the cowardness of our leaders. As if they will not die, as if they will not meet their Lord and stand before Him on a day لَيْسَ بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَ اللَّهِ حِجَابٌ, in which there will be no barrier between them and their master. And all because of petty, dunyawi gain, love of power. This, my young friends, is having such a negative effect on many of us that we're losing hope in the mercy of Allah, we're losing hope in the power of Allah, and we're losing hope in the help of Allah. The message today, my young friends, is simply this: لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله، لا تيأسوا من روح الله. Do not despair. Do not lose hope in Allah. Do not lose hope in the mercy of Allah. Do not lose hope in the power of Allah. Do not lose hope in the help of Allah. Allah, inna nasr Allahi qareeb. For verily the help of Allah is very close. Naturally, my young friends, we're affected. And it is only human to be affected what is happening at this moment in time in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Palestine. If we were not affected, then, my young friends, we will not be humans. And this pain that you and I feel, this is a sign of your Iman, and this is a sign of my Iman. Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-mu'minuna ka-rajulin wahid, in ishtaka aynuhu ishtaka kullu, wa in ishtaka ra'suhu ishtaka kullu." That the entire Muslim ummah is like one single body. If any one limb of this body is in pain, then the entire body feels this pain. If the head is in pain, the entire body feels this pain. If the eye is in pain, the entire body feels this pain. If any one believer is in pain, then the Somali will feel the pain. The Bengali will feel the pain. The Gujarati will feel the pain. The Pakistani will feel the pain. The Arab will feel the pain. The Nigerian will feel the pain. And they will not rest till they do not respond to their brother, and they do not eradicate this pain and put their Muslim brother to ease. This is a sign of your Iman. This is a sign of my Iman. My young friends, there is no need to despair, because this is not the end of the people of Gaza. They can nuke Gaza as many times as they like. This is not the end of Gaza. This is not the end of Islam. This is not the end of the Muslims. There is no power within this universe that can put an end to Islam. There is no power within this universe that can put an end to the Muslims other than one power, and that is the power of Allah. There has been no power that can put an end to Islam and the Muslims. There is no power that can put an end to the Islam and Muslims, and there will be no power right up to the day of judgment that can put an end to Islam and Muslims other than the power of Allah. Tell me, my young friends, how many empires came and went? Who can forget USSR, the former communist Tsarist Russia? What a power! What a power! Subhanallah, the zulm, the oppression, the tyranny, and the injustices that were carried out against hundreds and millions of Muslims, not for a day, not for a week, not for a month, for years on end in Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan. 70 years, my young friends. If you were to listen to the oppression coming out from the former USSR, even today the hair on your body would stand. Who can forget about the Crusaders and the rivers of blood flowing in the streets of Jerusalem? Who can forget the Spanish Inquisition and the zulm and tyranny and injustices that were carried out in Muslim Spain when we lost Spain? Who can forget the Tartars? They slaughtered 1.8 million Muslims. The count at this moment in time is Gaza is 20,000. It's a very high number. But what is it in comparison to 1.8 million Muslims? Not with bombs, with the sword. They were put to the sword. 1.8 million Muslims, more or less. 40 days the Tartars slaughtered in Baghdad. They threw so many books in the rivers that bridges were formed, and people were walking from one side of the bridge to the other side of the bridge with their carts and their donkeys and the horses on these books. Who can forget the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire at the dawn of Islam? And the zulm and tyranny, injustice, and the enmity and hatred towards Muslims, and how they came in their hundreds of thousands trying to their utmost best to annihilate Islam and the Muslims. My young friends, one by one they came with their pomp, splendor, armies, might, power. And one by one, my young friends, they melted like snow melts under the hot sun. Disappeared, disintegrated. Yet today, my young friends, Islam is still alive. The Muslims are still alive, and they will remain right till the day of judgment. This is not the end of the people of Gaza. This is not the end of Islam. This is not the end of the Muslims. My young friends, today Islam is the fastest growing religion. Short of 2 billion people. There's not a country on this planet in which you will not find a believer. You go all the way to Argentina, you will find people declaring the kalima La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. You go to Brazil, you will find people declaring the kalima la ilaha illallah. You go to Venezuela, you will find people declaring the kalima la ilaha illallah, and you will find madaris. You go to Panama, you will find people declaring the kalima la ilaha illallah, and you will find madaris in which the words of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, qala Allah and qala Rasul, are elevated. You go to Colombia, you will find people uttering the kalima la ilaha illallah. You go all the way to Alaska, you will find people uttering the kalima la ilaha illallah. Today, my young friends, you will not find a single country on planet Earth in which you will not find Islam, in which you will not find believers. Believe me, my young friends, in hundreds of years to come, in hundreds of years to come, you will not find a single planet. Even if you travel to a planet hundreds and millions of light years away from Earth, note this, my young friends, you will come across people that utter the kalima la ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. This kalima is to be elevated. It will be elevated. Just like today, my young friends, who could have thought about this 1400 years ago? One man stood up with a mission to elevate the kalima la ilaha illallah. Who could have thought and dreamt that after 1400 years there will not be a single place on this planet in which there will not be a kalima la ilaha illallah? At this moment in time, my young friends, this world has become a global village. A time will come when this kalima will be elevated in every corner of the multiverse. Till then, my young friends, the future is bright, because Islam and the Muslims are not going anywhere. The day there are no believers, the day there is no Quran, the day there is no Islam, my young friends, that will be the day when there's nothing else. There'll be no earth, there'll be no stars, there will be no moon, there will be no suns, there will be no planets, there will be no universe, there will be no multiverse. إِذَا السَّمَاءُ انْفَطَرَتْ وَإِذَا الْكَوَاكِبُ انْتَثَرَتْ وَإِذَا الْبِحَارُ فُجِّرَتْ وَإِذَا الْقُبُورُ بُعْثِرَتْ أَلِمَتْ نَفْسٌ مَا قَدَّمَتْ وَأَخَّرَتْ. My young friends, this is when the story will end. Nothing will remain. It is your Iman and the dhikr, my young friends, that is sustaining this universe and everything within it. It is your Iman and your dhikr, as a result of which, my young friends, everything within this universe, the planets, the sun, the stars, are working, moving, existing in complete peace and harmony. So tell me, why should you despair? Why should you lose hope? Why should you despair and why should you lose hope when you, my young friend, are the chosen one? You have Iman and you have Allah. You have Iman and you have Allah. There is nothing within this multiverse that is more valuable than having Allah and than having Iman. You can have the entire multiverse equal in gold. You have no Iman, you have nothing. You have Allah, you have Iman, my young friends, you have everything. You have success in the dunya, and you will have the everlasting success in the akhirah, in a life where there will be no end. You have the most valuable assets anyone can ever dream of. Real loss, which Allah considers as loss, is not having a ta'alluq with Allah and is not having Iman. Everything else, my young friends, comes and go. People come, people go. People are born, people are died. Everything is replaceable. You have a house today, you don't have a house tomorrow. You have a job today, you don't have a job tomorrow. My young friends, everything is replaceable. Your children are replaceable. Your wife is replaceable. Your job is replaceable. Your house is replaceable. There is only one thing that is not replaceable, and that is Iman. It is your most valuable asset. It is the most valuable asset of the Palestinians by the grace of Allah. You have Allah, you have Iman. The Palestinians have Allah, the Palestinians have Iman. And by the grace of Allah, this life is not about living for 5 years or 50 years or 5,000 years. If you live for 5,000 years, you don't have Allah, you don't have Iman. وَمَا هُوَ بِمُزَحْزِهِ مِنَ الْعَذَابِ. You haven't fulfilled your purpose in life. It is meaningless, my young friends. One day of life in which you have Allah and which you have Iman is better than 1,000,000 years of life in which you do not have Allah, you do not have Iman. By the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Palestinians are leaving this world in a manner in which they have their most valuable asset. We're seeing this on their tongues. We're seeing this when they dug up from the rubble, martyred, shaheed, dead. We're still seeing that their finger is raised with the shahada, bearing witness there is no God worthy of worship but Allah. They're leaving with their most valuable asset to go meet their most valuable asset, their creator and their maker. Why should we despair? Why should we despair? Why should we lose hope? And by the grace of Allah, in terms of the dunya, irrespective of what the outcome of this war will be, my young friends, the Palestinians, by the grace of Allah, have achieved a phenomenal victory. They've already defeated and humiliated the fourth greatest army on planet Earth. They made them bow. They made them bow. They hit them so hard, that it drove them to insanity, as a result of which they're carrying out this genocide. They do not know what hit them. And just like when a person becomes insane, he doesn't know what to do, he goes on a rampage. This is what has become of the Israelis. Victory is not always about how much destruction you cause. Victory is not only about how much of the enemy that you've killed. My young friends, if that was the case, then what happened in Uhud? 70 believers were killed in Uhud, they were martyred. More believers were killed in Uhud and martyred than those that didn't believe in Allah, the enemy. But they even got better of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah was covered in blood. His helmet got stuck to his cheek. His tooth became shaheed. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was saying, making dua, Allahumma aghfir li qawmi fa innahum la ya'lamun. But in spite of this, my young friends, this great loss of the believers, the Muslims were victorious. And the reason the Muslims were victorious, because the kuffar, when they came with their arrogance to the battlefield, they came with a mission, an objective. Their objective was to annihilate Islam and Muslims and put an end to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But they left the battlefield without fulfilling their objective. So much so, my young friends, that when they returned, they themselves acknowledged their failure and they regretted that they had an opportunity to fulfill their objective, but they did not take advantage of the situation and fulfill their objective. As a result of this, my young friends, the victory was for the Muslims. The Palestinians have humiliated this army. They've already acknowledged that they've lost the media war. The Palestinians succeeded in gaining support for their cause, for our cause, in a manner that they've never achieved over the last 75 years. And with this support, your support, my support, and the support of the hundreds of millions of people, my young friends, before October the 7th, there were only 5-6 million people dreaming of this dream that Palestine should be free and Palestine should be liberated by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is not 5 million, 6 million people that are dreaming this dream. Today, my young friends, there are hundreds of millions of people around the globe, those that believe in Allah, those that reject Allah, those that associate partners with Allah, whether they are Chinese, whether they are Burmese, whether they are American, whether they are English, whether they are Europeans, whether they are Africans, all coming out in support week after week in their thousands, protesting in support of the Palestinians. And inshallah, with this support, my young friends, the Palestinians will gain more strength and they will continue the resistance till inshallah, one day, whenever my master wills, Palestine will be free. The Palestinians have succeeded, my young friends, in exposing the true nature and the brutality of this occupier in a manner that they've never succeeded in the last 75 years. The last 75 years, they've been suffering in silence. Now, my young friends, they will never suffer in silence because they've unmasked the brutality and true nature of this oppressor. My young friends, we're seeing this in their bombing of hospitals. We're seeing this in their bombing of schools and nurseries and ambulance. It's got to such a degree, my young friends, even those that were supporting them and have been supporting them for years have slowly but surely started distancing themselves from them. When, my young friends, a people start oppressing, my young friends, this is the beginning of their downfall. This is the rule of my master, irrespective of who the oppressor is, whether that oppressor is one that believes in Allah or whether the oppressor is one that doesn't believe in Allah. Allah does not like dhulm. Allah has made dhulm and oppression haram. Allah does not like zalimeen. Allah does not like the oppressors. When a qawm begins to do zulm, when a qawm becomes arrogant and believes that they're untouchable, my young friends, that is the beginning of the end of that qawm. I have yaqeen, this is the beginning of the end of this aggressor, and slowly but surely this zulm, this tyranny, this injustice will come to an end. And inshallah, in our lifetime, if not in our lifetime, then in our children's lifetime, whenever my master has willed, my young friends, Palestine will be free and the people of Palestine will also be free. This is not about October the 7th. For the last 75 years, there's only ever been one objective, and that objective is to break the resolve, the firmness, and the resoluteness of the people of Palestine. This is why, my young friends, for the last 75 years, the intimidation, the oppression, the tyranny, the humiliation, imprisoning children, women without any crime whatsoever, restricting their movement, their right to work, dignity, honor, my young friends, has been going on for over 75 years. Now they saw it as an opportunity, And that's why this siege, nothing comes in, nothing goes out. This bombardment of hospitals and ambulances, the objective is only one thing, my young friends. The objective is to break the people of Gaza, break the people of Palestine. Spare no one, not even their babies, not even their children, that they never see this dream. They never dream this dream. Their children don't dream this dream. Balki 100 generations down the line, they don't dream this dream that Palestine should ever be free. This is the objective. Why should we despair? Tell me, my young friends, has that objective been achieved? Have they broke the resolve and the firmness of the people of Palestine? What have you witnessed? What have you seen? What are you seeing? وَمَا زَادُهُمْ إِلَّا إِيمَانٌ وَتَسْلِيمًا. Does it not remind you of Uhud? When the Prophet ﷺ and the believers returned to Medina, to al-Munawwara, 70 have been martyred, many have become injured. The kuffar have gone back. They regret. They could have finished the Muslims. They should have finished the Muslims. They sent a message. They sent a person to go scare the believers. Tell them that the Quraysh are coming with an army like the likes of which they've never seen. And this army will annihilate them from the face of the earth. This person comes, meets the Prophet ﷺ and conveys the message. Rather than the believers being afraid, look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran. What did they say? فَزَادُمْ إِيمَانًا حَسْبُنَ اللَّهُ وَنِعْمَ الْوَكِيلُ. Rather than being afraid, they said, حَسْبُنَ اللَّهُ وَنِعْمَ الْوَكِيلُ. Allah is sufficient for us. And in spite of the fact, my young friends, 70 have been martyred, many have been injured, they're tired, they leave Medina for a second time to fight the kuffar. This is what we witness today. In spite of them losing every member of their family, in spite of them losing their livelihood, their houses have been blown to bits. They've lost everything. They've lost everything. But still, my young friends, they're not prepared to run away to the Sinai desert as was their wish and their desire, and they're standing up against this aggression and oppression, and they will continue to do this. We have witnessed stories of Iman, my young friends, which remind us of the Khairul Qurun. Who would have thought in the 21st century we will witness stories of Iman which remind us of the Khair al-Qurun? A father lost his child, he's become shaheed. And how many were there like this? Rather than mourning his death, he's thanking Allah for this great blessing and offers 2 rakat Salatul Shukr for blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him. Doesn't it remind you of that Sahabi who's taken to the gallows to be executed, and the kuffar ask him for his last wish, and he says to them, allow me to offer 2 rakats in salah, for the time has come to meet my Lord. And when he offers those 2 rakats, he says to them, had it not been for the fear that you people think I'm afraid of death, I would have asked you to allow me to read another 2 rakats. You've got a guy, he's lost his child. He's not mourning his death. He's saying, because now his child will meet Prophet ﷺ in the Akhirah, he's taking advantage. Rather than mourning and crying, he's talking to him. And he's saying to him, convey my salam to my beloved Nabi Muhammad ﷺ. Doesn't it remind you of that Sahabi? He's in his last throes. He was killed by the kuffar just before he died. There's no one there. Prophet ﷺ is hundreds of miles away in Medina al-Munawwara. He makes dua to Allah. Oh Allah, I beg you. His focus is not upon himself or his family members. His focus is upon his Nabi and his beloved. And he's saying to Allah, oh Allah, I beg you, convey my salam to my Habib Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Such was the sincerity and purity that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is hundreds of miles away. Allah through wahi informs Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam utters from a few hundred miles away, wa alaykumus salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is the level of Iman. My young friends, there's no need for you and I to be worried about the Palestinians, for Palestine will be free. My young friends, the blood of a shaheed never goes to waste, and the dua of a madloom never goes unanswered. Your Rabb has taken an oath and promised, لَأَنْصُرَنَّكَ وَلَوْ بَعْدَ حِينٍ. My young friends, Palestine will be free. Wallahu ya'lam wa antum la ta'lamun. And Allah knows, and you do not know. What you and I need to realize, my young friend, is simply this: with Iman will come test. With Iman will come difficulty. You can't separate Iman from difficulty. They lazim, malzoom. This dunya that Allah has created, it is not a place to wine and dine. And it is not a place to take the chill pill. Ad-dunya sijnul mu'min. The Prophet ﷺ said that this dunya for a believer is a prison. The reason Allah created you and me, my young friends, خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا, is to put you and I through difficulty, to test us. My young friends, Allah says, أَحَسِبَ النَّاسِ أَن يُتْرَكُوا أَن يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ. Do you think that you will say, La ilaha illallah, there's no God worthy of worship but Allah, and that's it? After that you can just take the chill pill and enjoy yourself? There will be no difficulty, there will be no misery, there will be no test. Do you think أم حسبتم أن تدخلوا الجنة ولما يأتكم مثل الذين خلوا من قبلكم مستهم البأساء والضراء وزلزلوا حتى يقول الرسول والذين آمنوا معه متى نصر الله. Do you think that you're going to enter Jannah just like this? Yet you haven't been tested like those before you were tested. They were tested with calamities. They were tested with difficulties. They were tested with poverty. They were tested by the enemy getting the better of them. They were tested so much and shaken that even the Nabi of Allah and those that believed with him began to say, when will the help of Allah come? When will the help of Allah come? Allah says, my young friends, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوءِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ. We're going to definitely test you, O Musliman. We're surely going to test you. Sometime this test will be that your enemy will get the better of you. Sometime this test will be that you will make a loss in terms of your wealth. Sometimes the test will be that you will make a loss in the sense that you will become shaheed. You will lose your life. You will lose your family members. My young friends, as we are seeing in Gaza, my young friends, in this dunya, you and I cannot benefit from the luxury of driving a car. Driving a car is not a luxury in this dunya, it's a necessity. For a car takes you from A to B. You and I cannot benefit from this blessing of a car without going through some form of difficulty. You have to pay for 20, 30 lessons. You have to sacrifice your wealth. You have to sacrifice your time in taking these lessons. Then you have to pass a theory test. You have to pass a practical test. How many of us failed these tests many times? We have to do all this just before we can drive a small car. This is the dunya, and you think that you and I are going to receive the everlasting blessings of Jannah. فيها أنهار من ماء غير آسن وأنهار من لبن لم يتغير طعمه وأنهار من خمر لذة للشاربين. You're going to receive the rivers of milk. You're going to receive the rivers of fresh water. You're going to receive the rivers of honey, whereof the flavor has not changed. You're going to receive the rivers of wine without any difficulty. you're going to receive hurricane so beautiful. When they spit in the oceans, if she were to spit in the ocean, the 7 oceans, my young friends, the salty water of the ocean would become sweeter than honey. Her fingertip, the beauty of it, would put the beauty of the sun and the moon to shame. They are so beautiful, so beautiful. When your eyes falls upon one of them, my young friends, your eyes will pop, your jaws will drop. They are so beautiful, some of them. Had Allah not already decreed and destined that Jannatis are not going to die, just by looking at them, my young friends, your heart would have popped and you would have died. You think you're going to receive this just like this? You think you're going to receive the palaces of Jannah made out of rubies, diamonds and emeralds, and you're going to receive blessings? مَا لَا عَيْنٌ رَأَتْ وَلَا أُذُنٌ سَمِعَتْ وَلَا خَطَرَ عَلَى قَلْبِ بَشَرٍ. Blessing which no eye has seen, blessing which no ear has heard. Even the thought of these blessings has not crossed the human mind. My young friends, you're going to receive وَلَكُمْ فِيهَا مَا تَشْتَهِي أَنفُسُكُمْ وَلَكُمْ فِيهَا مَا تَدَّعُونَ. Wherever your heart desires, whatever it desires, whatever you ask your Rabb for, you're going to receive all this. For how long? My young friends, a life that will never come to an end. For billions and billions and billions of years, the blessings will just increase in terms of beauty, in terms of color, in terms of taste. You're going to receive this just like this by just saying La ilaha illallah and then taking a chill pill and resting till your last breath without any difficulty, with just ease. Never in a million years, my young friends, for everything has a price. Everything has a price. There is nothing for free. Everything has a price. The more valuable an item is, the more rare a thing is, the more unique a thing is, the higher the price. Look at the price of gold. Look at the price of diamonds, my young friends. Allah inna sil'at Allahi ghaliya. Allah inna sil'at Allahi al-Jannah. There is nothing more valuable, there is nothing more rare and unique than this Jannah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. This is why, my young friends, this is the ultimate reward of a believer. The price, إن الله اشترى من المؤمنين أنفسهم وأموالهم بأن لهم الجنة. You want Jannah? Then you're looking in Gaza, they're paying the price. What will you have to give to Allah for Jannah? You will sacrifice your wealth if Allah wants your wealth. You will sacrifice your children if Allah wants your children. If Allah wants your time, you will give Allah your time. If Allah wants your life, you will give Allah your life. And if Allah wants all these things, you will give Allah all these things. And at the same time, you will utter رَضِيتُ بِاللَّهِ رَبَّا وَبِالْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا وَبِمُحَمَّدٍ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ نَبِيًّا وَرَسُولًا. I'm happy with Allah as my Lord, Islam as my deen, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as my Nabi and my Rasul. This is when my Rabb and your Rabb will give you this Jannah. My young friends, you need to realize, and I need to realize, this is the rule of Allah. This has been rule of Allah, and this will be the rule of Allah right till the day of judgment. You and I and the people of Gaza are not the first people that Allah is testing, that Allah is putting through difficulty. Allah says to make it easy for you, to make it easy for me, so you can understand the tariqah of Allah, the sunnah of Allah with regards to those believe. So I can understand the tariqah of Allah and the sunnah of Allah with regards to those that believe. Allah says, O Muslimano, وَلَقَدْ فَتَنَّ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ. You're not the only ones that have been tested. I've tested those before you. Look at Fir'aun, my young friends, how he would persecute the believers in his time. يُذَبِّيُ أَبْنَاهُمْ. He would take their children and he would slaughter them before their very own eyes. My young friends, the women, he would make them slaves. He didn't even spare his own wife Asiya. He nailed her to the ground and she begged for Allah's mercy. Open his book. What did she say to Allah? Oh Allah, Rabbi najjini min Fir'aun wa amalih, najjini min al-qawmi dhalimin. Oh Allah, I'm begging you, I'm begging you. Oh Allah, save me from this zalim. Oh Allah, save me from this zalim and his work. Save me from these zalimeen. I ask you, my young friends, what did my Nabi say to Khabbab? Khabbab is that one individual who they would drag over heaps of smoldering charcoal to burn. He comes to the Prophet ﷺ and he says, Ya Rasulullah, the kuffar are persecuting us. The kuffar are torturing us. Ya Rasulullah, it's intolerable. Ya Rasulullah, I can't bear it anymore. You are the near one. You are the dear one. You are the one. When you raise your hand before your Lord, your Lord loves you so much that He will never reject you, that He will never turn you away. Oh my beloved Nabi, Ala tastansiru lana, Ala tad'u lana. Will you not make dua for us? Will you not ask your Rabb to help us? What did my Nabi say, my young friends? My Nabi said, O Khabbab, in the nations before you, there were people. A man would be taken, a hole would be dug, he would be placed inside this hole, a large saw would be brought, it would be placed on the middle of his head, and then this man would be cut into 2 pieces. Even that wouldn't turn him away from the deen of Allah. Even that wouldn't turn him away from Allah. In the nations before you, men would be taken, their flesh and their skin would be stripped all the way to the bone, so much so that the bone would be visible. Oh Khabbab, even that wouldn't turn him away from the deen of Allah. Even that wouldn't turn him away from Allah. My young friends, Allah has tested the believers. Allah is testing the believers. Allah will always test the believers. Where do you and I compare with the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? In terms of qurb, closeness to Allah. In terms of ma'rifat, recognition. In terms of love. They are the near ones. They are the dear ones. They are the ones, my young friends, that never wronged Allah. What does my Allah say with regards to my Nabi Muhammad? إِنَّ فَتَحْنَا لَكَ فَتْحًا مُبِينًا لِيَغْفِرَ لَكَ اللَّهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِكَ وَمَا تَأَخَّرَ. Prophet ﷺ would worship for hours and hours on end. And the Sahaba would say, Ya Rasulullah, why do you worship when Allah's purified you? Ghafara, there's a barrier between you and sin. Oh my beloved Nabi, you are so pure that you can't even wrong your master. You can't even wrong your Allah. You can't even commit sin. You can't even disobey Him. This was the piety and purity of Muhammad. And this was the piety and purity of the Anbiya. My young friends, they are the near ones. They are the dear ones. You would think, my young friends, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wouldn't put them through any difficulty because they are the ones that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. When Sayyidina Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu ta'ala anhu asked the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Ya Rasulullah, ayyun nasi ashaddu bala? Who are the people that Allah tests most of all? Tell me, my young friend, what was the response of my Nabi? Who are the people that Allah tests most of all? The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam replied, Al-Anbiya. Allah tests the prophets of Allah most of all. Allah tests those that He loves most of all. Those that are near and dear to Him most of all. Then those that are near and dear to Him. Then those that are near and dear to Him. Then those that are near and dear to Him. Look at Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam. Where do you and I compare with Ibrahim? Musa was Kalimullah. Allah called him to Mount Tur and conversed with him. Adam was Safiyullah. Isa was Kalimatullah and Ruhullah. And my young friends, Ibrahim was the Khalil of Allah. Allah befriended him. He became the near and dear friend of Allah. What didn't my Allah do to Ibrahim? My young friends, look at the test. Look at the test. He was thrown inside fire, the Khalil of Allah. They throw him inside the fire. He's flying in the air, heading towards the fire, and the angels approach him. Oh, Khalil, Ibrahim, let us help you. Ibrahim says no. The angels say, if you don't seek our help, then ask your Lord, ask your Rabb. Ibrahim responds, Ilmuhu bihali, yughni an su'ali. My master knows what is happening with me. When my master can see and he knows what is happening with me, there's no need for me to ask. If this is what my Rabb has chosen for me, that I land inside this fire and burn, I will not ask my master. Raditu billahi rabba wa bil islami deena. I'm happy with my master and I'm happy with whatever Allah has destined for me. And Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam lands inside the fire. This wasn't the only test. How many years, my young friends, Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam made dua. Rabbi habli min as-salihin. Rabbi habli min as-salihin. Oh Allah, I'm begging you, give me a righteous son. Oh Allah, I'm begging you, give me a righteous son. How many nights he stayed awake and he begged and he begged and he begged. If you pick up the books of tafsir, it will mention that as Ibrahim والسلام, was around 80 years of age when Allah responded to the call and cry of Ibrahim, that Allah gave him Ismail. After all these years, Allah gave him Ismail. My young friends, what does Allah do? Oh Ibrahim, take Ismail with his mother and go leave him in a barren desert, in a place where there's no water, where there's nothing. And Ismail left him there with a little bit of water, a little bit of dates. And then what does Allah do? Allah makes him connect. Allah makes him connect with his son Ismail, and the bond between father and son is becoming stronger and stronger and stronger. And when the bond gets to that stage, my young friends, when you cannot break this bond, you cannot separate this bond, Allah tests Ibrahim again. Ibrahim, you claim that you love me. Let me see today, how much you love me. Do you love me more, or do you love this child which you begged for and cried for and asked for years on end? Let me see today how much you love me, how much you love this child. Take this child if you love me more. Take this child, and I want you to offer this child in sacrifice. I want you to slaughter this child with your bare hands. This was Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. My young friends, you think this siege in Gaza is bad? It is bad. But my young friends, where does this siege of Gaza, which took place on the dunya, and even then some form of aid was getting in from Rafah, even though it was very, very small, where does this siege compare with the siege of Yunus alayhi salatu wasalam? Yunus alayhi salam was a Nabi of Allah, pure and free from sin. Anbiya do not disobey Allah. Anbiya spend their lives carrying out the instructions of Allah. They've been chosen for a mission. They are special selected people. He was a special chosen people. Look at his siege, not on the dunya. His siege, my young friends, was in the sea. Nothing could get in. Nothing could get in. There wasn't darkness just for a day. My young friends, never mind no electric. Never mind no food. My young friends, there wasn't even the light of the day. There was total darkness. The darkness of the night. The darkness of the sea. The darkness of the stomach of a whale. Nothing goes in. Nothing goes out. In Gaza, there are 2.3 million people. My young friends, when you see others suffer, you still have some form of strength because you have others around you. You've seen others going through difficulties, calamities. You see others losing their mothers, their fathers, their children, starving. So this gives you strength that if he can make sabr, I can make sabr. I ask you, my young friends, who was with Yunus inside the stomach of the whale when he called out, La ilaha illa ant, subhanak, inni kuntu min al-zalimin, so close to the seabed that he could hear the stones glorify my master. These were the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam. Who can forget my Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? My young friends, I ask you, you tell me, has Allah ever created a human being more akram, more honorable to Allah, more near to Allah, more dear to Allah, more beloved to Allah, more than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? No, my young friends, if Allah has created this universe for any one person, then that person was none other than Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. My young friends, look at the difficulties that Allah put his Habib through before he even comes into the dunya. Before he even comes into the dunya, what does my Rabb say? وَالضُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى وَلَسَوْفَ يُؤْتِيكَ رَبُّكَ فَتَرْضَى أَلَمْ يَجِدَكَ يَتِيمًا فَآوَى. Allah took away his father. My Nabi my Nabi could not even benefit from the love of a father. My Nabi just got used to his mother Amina, and at the age of 6, my Rabb takes away his mother. My Nabi just got used to the love of a grandfather and got used to his grandfather, and my Nabi and my Allah takes away his grandfather at the age of 8. How many members of his own family my Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam buried whilst he was alive? Who can forget Khadija? My young friends, our mother Khadija was the one that would comfort the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Nabi is that individual that's been chosen to comfort people and to give them love. Khadija received the honor that she was the one chosen to comfort the Prophet ﷺ. When Prophet ﷺ met Jibreel for the first time, and the Prophet ﷺ was parishan, and he came rushing home. Zammiluni, Zammiluni, Ya Khatija. Oh Khatija, cover me. Oh Khatija, cover me. And the Prophet ﷺ related what happened in the cave of Hira. What did my mother say? My mother said, comfort in the Prophet ﷺ, Wallahi la yuhzik Allah abada. I swear by Allah, your Lord will never disgrace you. إنك لتصل الرحم وتحمل الكلب وتكسب المعدوم وتقرئ الضيف وتعين على نوائب الحق. Because O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you do sila rahmi, you do good to your relatives, you carry the burden of the weak, you entertain guests, and you help in those difficulties which are haq. She was chosen to comfort the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. My Nabi, my young friends, had to bury her inside in his life. How do you think my Nabi felt then? This is just the beginning. How many of his children my Nabi had to bury with his own hands? All his boys, my young friends. Ibrahim, the Prophet ﷺ had to bury. Tears are flowing from his eyes, and the Sahaba are saying, Ya Rasulullah, what is this? You're crying. And the Prophet ﷺ said, this is mercy which Allah has placed in the heart of the merciful. He buried Ibrahim, my young friends, in his life. He buried Qasim inside his life. He buried Tayyib and Tahir whilst he was alive. How many of his daughters did the Prophet ﷺ bury, my young friends? He buried Ruqayya, he buried Kulsum. This is not the end, my young friends. Look at the persecution and torture when he declared La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. From verbal persecution, they said Sahir, he's a magician. They said Sha'ir, he's a poet. They said Kahin, he's a soothsayer. They said Asatir al-Awwaleen, these are fairy tales. You made these stories up. A Christian by the name of Adas teaches you these stories. It doesn't come to an end. From verbal persecution to physical persecution, they start by belittling him. They would go around and spit on his face. They would take dust and dirt and they would cover his blessed body with it, and he would return home to Fatima. And when Fatima would see her father coming like this, she would rush to him and she would cry and she would wipe away the dust, and the Prophet ﷺ would console her. Ya bunayya la tabki fa inna Allah maniun abak. Oh my daughter, do not cry. Oh my daughter, do not cry, for Allah will take care of your father, for Allah will help your father, for Allah will not forsake your father. My young friends, it doesn't come to an end. Even when my Nabi would prostrate before his master, they did not let him be. They would take the abdominal contents of a camel, the ojri, the impurity, and they would place it on the back of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As a result of which my Nabi would not be able to raise his head in sajda. It was only when Fatima would come and she would take the impurity off, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would be able to raise his head. Who can forget, my young friends, when they forced the sons of Abu Lahab to divorce the daughters of Muhammad? How do you think my Nabi felt the day when his daughters, two daughters, were divorced? Not because they had wronged their husbands. No, my young friends, these were the daughters of a Nabi. They were only divorced because my Nabi said, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. There's no God worthy of worship but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. You look at this siege of Gaza for 50 days, my young friends. Look, who can forget the siege of my Nabi? It wasn't for a week, it wasn't for a month. For 3 years, nothing could come in, nothing could go out. The Quraysh refused to buy anything from them, sell anything to them. It got to a stage, my young friends, when the believers were eating the leaves of trees. My young friends, who can forget what happened to my Nabi in Ta'if? He was stoned, my young friends, showered with stones. Every time he took a step, he was showered with stones, so much stones that his body is covered with blood, and my Nabi is struggling to walk, and he begs Allah for his mercy. إِلَيْكَ أَشْكُ دُؤْفَ قُوَّتِي وَكِلَّةَ هِيلَتِي وَهَوَانِي عَلَى النَّاسِ يَا أَرْحَمَ الرَّاحِمِينَ. Who can forget what they did to his companions and his family members? Bilal, Khabbab, Sayyidina Ammar ibn Yasir radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and the likes. That they were persecuted so much that they were forced to migrate to Abyssinia. It didn't come to an end. Then they were forced to migrate to Madinatul Munawwara. How do you think my Nabi felt the day he had to leave Makkatul Mukarramah and he had to leave the house of Allah? Now he's left Makkah. even then they did not let him go in one piece. They made elan and they've announced, whoever brings back the head of Muhammad, he will receive such a reward. And people are now chasing him. People are now after him. He gets to Medina. They do not let him rest in Medina. 1,000 strong come in Badr. And my Nabi is crying and making dua. Allahumma in tuhlak hadhihi al-isaba la tu'bad. Oh Allah, if this group of believers is destroyed today, you will never be worshipped right up to the day of judgment. It doesn't come to an end. Then 3,000 come, my young friends, in Uhud, and they injure the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's covered in blood and he's making dua. Allahumma aghfir li qawmi fa innahum la ya'lamun. It doesn't come to an end, my young friends. Then in Khandaq, 12,000 men come. The Arabian Peninsula have never seen an army so big. They've surrounded Madinatul Munawwara. It is bitterly cold. The Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala are struggling. There's poverty, there's hunger. The hunger level was such, my young friends. The Sahaba have a stone tied to their stomach, and my Nabi has 2 stones tied to his stomach. The situation was so bad that your Rabb paints the picture in the Quran. إِذْ جَاءُكُمْ مِنْ فَوْقِكُمْ وَمِنْ أَسْفَلَ مِنْكُمْ وَالزَّاغَتِ الْأَبْصَارُ وَبَلَغَتِ الْقُلُوبُ الْحَنَاجِرَ وَتَظُنُّونَ بِاللَّهِ الظُّنُونَ هُنَالِكَ ابْتُلِيَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَزُلْزِلُوا زِلْزَالًا شَدِيدًا. The hearts reach the throats, and you are harboring doubts with regards to Allah, and the believers were tested, a mighty testing. This went on from the birth of Islam till Makkah was conquered. Not for a day, not for a week, not for 50 years as been taking place at this moment in time in Gaza. It took place for 13 years in Makkah, 8 years in Madinatul Munawwara, a total of 21 years till Makkah was finally conquered. And who is this individual? There is no human being that Allah has ever created, that Allah will ever create, more dear and more honorable to him than Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you and I think that we're going to go into Jannah just like this, by saying La ilaha illallah, without showing Allah our true love, and without Allah testing our love. We're just going to go Jannah like this. Now you will understand as to why the people of Gaza are going through this difficulty. The more near and dear you are to Allah, the stronger your Iman, the stronger your Islam, the tougher your test, and the higher and the more severe your test, and the higher your rank. Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala test? Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala test? The reality is, my master is simply this. He's the Shenshah. He's the Badshah. La yusal amma yafal. He's not questioned. He does as he pleases. But Allah has made it known in the Quran. فَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ صَدَقُوا وَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ الْكَاذِبِينَ. Allah, through these difficulties and tests, Allah makes known the truth of those that are truthful. And Allah makes known to people like you and me the falsehood and the lies of the liars. Allah doesn't need to test anyone. Allah knows. Allah knows Adam here. Allah knows Abdullah here. Allah knows what they're capable of. Allah knows if he were to put Adam through a test, whether he would succeed or whether he wouldn't succeed. Allah knows if he put Abdullah through a test, whether Abdullah would be able to succeed, whether Abdullah would not be able to succeed, whether Abdullah would still say Raditu billahi rabban. Allah knows all this. But why does Allah test? So that people like you and me can know, my young friends. Because tomorrow, for example, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the highest rank to Adam in Jannah, and hopefully so it'll be like this, that Allah blesses him with the rafaqat and the companionship of my Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, based on Allah's own knowledge, Abdullah can raise objections on Allah. Why did he receive such a great rank? If you put me through that, I would also have made sabr. So why did I not receive the same rank? Why did I receive the second rank in Jannah, or only the first rank in Jannah? So this is why, my young friends, Allah puts you through the test in the dunya, and Allah makes it known who is the hypocrite and who is the true believer. And by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you don't need me to tell you, you know yourself. It's become very, very clear who is the believer and who is the hypocrite. It's become very, very clear. It is at the time of test the reality of a person comes to mind. This is the time everyone claims to love Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No one can see inside your heart whether you actually love Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is at the time of test. Even at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the hypocrites, they used to pray just like you and I pray. They used to go out in jihad. They used to give sadaqah. How were they exposed? Through difficulties and through tests. So Allah puts us through these difficulties and through these tests to see who will still say La ilaha illallah, who will say Raditu billahi rabba wa bil islami dina, who will say Kullan yusibana illa ma kataballahu lana. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests us. And at the same time, my young friends, as believers, we need to understand and realize whatever Allah does, whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does for a believer, there is always khair and there is always goodness in it. There is always khair and there's always goodness in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does for a believer. Whether you and I can comprehend it or not, or whether you and I can see or not, is entirely a different thing. Sometimes, my young friends, you may see the goodness there and then in what Allah has chosen for you. Sometimes you may not see the goodness there and then. You may see it in a week, you may see it in a month, you may see it in a year, you may see it in 5, you may see it in 10, you may see it before you die. And sometimes, my young friends, you may not see the goodness of that thing in this life, you see the goodness of that thing in the next life. And that's why you will praise and thank Allah for doing whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did. Allah says in the Quran, فَأَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ وَأَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. You might dislike something, yet the very thing that you dislike, just like you and I at this moment in time are disliking the situation in Gaza because we're seeing people suffering, we're seeing people starving, we're seeing children being mutilated and bombarded. We're seeing this zulm, tyranny and injustice. We're disliking the situation. So Allah says in the Quran, sometimes you might dislike something, yet the very thing that you dislike, goodness for you is in that very thing. I'm just going to give you one example from the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and then I will conclude. Prophet ﷺ saw a dream that he was making tawaf of the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's gone to Makkah and he's making tawaf the house of Allah. So the Prophet ﷺ related this dream to his companions, and when the companions heard this dream, they were overjoyed. Especially the Muhajirin, because the Muhajirin had been expelled, they'd been oppressed. Just injustices were carried out against them. They were beaten, all types of atrocities were committed, and they were forced to come to Medina to Munawwara. And it was years since they last saw the house of Allah. And from the moment they left Makkah, there was always dreaming, yearning, desiring one day to go back to the house of Allah and see the house of Allah. So when the Prophet ﷺ related this dream, they were all overjoyed, and they started making preparations to go with the Prophet ﷺ. And in the 6th year of Hijrah, the Prophet ﷺ left with 1,400 men to go to Makkah al-Mukarramah to perform Umrah. And all they had with them, their ihram sheets, their sacrificial animals, and they took no weapons with them, because the objective was to visit the house. The objective wasn't to fight the kuffar. And the reason they took nothing with them, so that the kuffar know that they've come only to visit the house. So they left. Prophet ﷺ sent a spy ahead, the spy to see the reaction of the Quraysh. The spy came and informed the Prophet ﷺ that the kuffar have put on their war gear, and the kuffar have announced that nowhere on God's earth will we allow Muhammad and his followers to come and enter Makkah al-Mukarramah. Prophet ﷺ sent a Sahabi called Khirash, go inform these people that we've not come to fight, we've only come to visit the house of Allah. My young friends, luckily his camel was killed and he just managed to escape. Then the Prophet ﷺ sent Usman Ghani for the same reason. They said to Usman Ghani, you can perform the tawaf, you can perform the umrah, but we will never allow Muhammad. What will the Arabs of Arabia think? That he's forced us, he's got one above us, he made us bow down and he's allowed us to, made us allow him to enter. We will never allow this. They will never enter this year. We will never allow this. Now meanwhile, a rumor spread and the Prophet ﷺ was informed that Usman has been killed. Usman has been made shaheed. Now this was too much for the Sahaba, and in spite of the fact that they didn't come to fight, in spite of the fact that they only had sheets of cloth and sacrificial animals, and no weapons and no war horses and no war camels, every single one of them pledged allegiance to the Prophet ﷺ that we will fight till death. And the Prophet ﷺ made bay'ah for Usman, on behalf of Usman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Now when the Quraysh came to know that the Muslims have pledged allegiance to the Prophet ﷺ, and they will fight till death. They became afraid. So they started sending people for negotiations. Cutting the story short, one of the wars that they sent was Urwa. When Urwa, he first began by insulting the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, you know, these people that you brought, you want to fight us? They're not going to fight. They're going to run away. This was his first impression. This was before he had a good look at the Sahaba. When he got close to them and he saw them from close, when he went back to the Quraysh, he said to the Quraysh, I swear by Allah, I've been to many a king. I've been to Qaisar, I've been to Kisra, I've been to Najashi, I've been to the king of Rome, I've been to the king of Persia, I've been to many a king. But I've never seen a king loved by his companions as much as I've seen the companions of Muhammad love Muhammad. Even his sputum, when he spits, even his sputum doesn't touch the ground. They receive it in their hands and they anoint their bodies with it. This is the love that they have for him. So think very carefully what you're going to do, because these people will fight till death and they will not abandon him. So they sent a man called Suhail to negotiate the terms of the treaty. Khulasa, a lot of the terms that the Prophet ﷺ agreed with went against the believers. For example, that the Muslims cannot perform tawaf now, cannot perform umrah now. They will have to go back to Medina. They'll come back next year and we will only allow them 3 days to stay in Makkah al-Mukarramah and no more. Likewise, if any Muslim goes from Makkah to Medina, the Muslims will send him back. But if any Muslim goes from Medina to Makkah, the kuffar of Makkah will not send that believer back. Terms like this, conditions like this. Now, Prophet ﷺ agreed to them. Now the Sahaba were disheartened, just like you and I, disheartened with the situation. They were disheartened and they were furious. Why is it that the Prophet ﷺ has agreed to all these terms? They all go against us. So much so, my young friends, Umar Farouk. Who is Umar Farouk? The person that the Prophet ﷺ, if there was to be a Nabi after me, then this would be no more than, there'd be no other than Sayyidina Umar Farouk radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Umar was so affected by what happened that he came to the Nabi of Allah and he said to the Prophet ﷺ, Alasta Nabiyyallahi haqqa, are you not the true Prophet of Allah? The Prophet ﷺ said, indeed I'm the true Prophet of Allah. Then he said to the Prophet ﷺ, he asked, Alasna ala al-haq wa aduna al-batil, are we not on the haqq? Are we not in the right and our enemy in the wrong, on the batil? The Prophet ﷺ said, indeed, we are on haqq, they are on batil. Then Umar said, if that's the case, O Muhammad, why are we being humiliated? Why are we being disgraced? The Prophet ﷺ said, Inni Abdullah wa Rasuluh, I'm the servant of Allah. I'm the messenger of Allah. Walastu a'si, I do not disobey him. Wa huwa nasiri, and my Lord will not forsake me. My Lord will take care of me. My Lord will help me. It didn't come to an end here. Umar was so disheartened. After this, he went to Abu Bakr and he asked the same questions. Is he not the true Nabi of Allah? Are we not on haqq and they on batil? Oh Abu Bakr, did he not tell us that we were going to make tawaf? Abu Bakr said, oh Umar, did he tell you that you were going to make tawaf this year? It is only then that Umar backed off. My young friends, the Sahaba was so disheartened, so disheartened. These are those very people, never mind the Prophet ﷺ asking them, they were prepared to lay down their lives by him just indicating and making ishara. But on that day, after this truth, the Prophet ﷺ told them to sacrifice their animals, take off their ihrams, shave their heads. He said this once, nobody moved. He said this twice, nobody moved. He said this 3 times, nobody moved. This is how disheartened they were, and this whole situation had such an impact on them, my young friends, that they were just thinking about this, my young friends, and they couldn't, and this is what they're thinking about. It was only when the Prophet ﷺ took off his ihram, sacrificed his animals, shaved his head, then did the Sahaba after this sacrifice the animals, shaved their heads and took off their ihrams. Now they leave. They go back to Medina al-Munawwara, and as they're returning to Medina, the verse of the Quran is revealed. Inna fatahna laka fathan mubina. Inna fatahna laka fathan mubina. Allah is telling Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that what happened in Hudaybiyyah is not a setback. This is victory. Wallahu ya'lam wa antum la ta'lamun. And Allah knows and you know not. Allah knows and you no, no. Now, how can that be a victory? Because if you look at the situation and you analyze it, we see a situation of humiliation and we see a situation of defeat. The Muslims have been humiliated. The Muslims were not allowed to perform Umrah. They were told to go back and they're going back. And next year they're only allowed 3 days. They can't bring their weapons, swords and those in shield as well. So we've got a situation of humiliation and defeat, and Allah's calling it a victory. My friends, Wallahu ya'lam wa antum la ta'lamun. Allah knows and you do not know. My young friends, you and I cannot see beyond, never mind tomorrow, we cannot see beyond the next second what's going to happen, what you will receive, whether you live, whether you will die, what will happen. We cannot see beyond our nose. My young friends, we cannot understand the wisdom of Allah. We cannot understand the greater plan of Allah. In this so-called apparent situation of humiliation and defeat, inside it was a conquest hidden. My young friends, this is what became the basis of the conquest of Makkah and the conquest of Khaybar. Because before the truce, the Muslims were always at war. In Badr, in Uhud, in Khandaq, there was no opportunity to interact with the kuffar, and nor did the kuffar had an opportunity to interact with the Muslims. In this, when this peace treaty was signed, my young friends, then there was time to interact. The kuffar got to see the beauty of Islam, and as a result, because of this interaction, my young friends, they began to declare the kalima La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. So much so that in 2 years of this truce, more people embraced Islam than 16 years before it. And the proof is in this: when the Prophet ﷺ came to Hudaybiyyah, he came with 1,400 men. 2 years after, when he marched to Makkah, there was 10,000 people with him. In this apparent situation of humiliation and defeat, in reality was victory, because it was the barakat of that Makkah was conquered and Islam was elevated, and it is elevated and it will remain elevated right till the day of judgment. At this moment in time, we're seeing suffering, my young friends. We're seeing a situation which we're affected by naturally. We don't know the bigger plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The blood of a shaheed never goes to waste. The dua of a Muslim will never go unanswered. There's so much good coming out at this moment in time, and there is so much good that will come out. Look at those that are leaving this world, my young friends. You're all going to leave. I'm going to leave. Allah says, وَمَا جَعَلْنَا لِبَشَرٍ مِّن قَبْلِكَ الْخُلْدَ. Nobody's going to remain. Allah created us. This is a temporary station. This is not the final abode. Some of us are here for a week. Some of us are here for a month, for a year, 50 years, 100 years, 500 years. No one will remain forever and ever. The objective of this life is not to live for 500 years and disobey Allah. وَمَا هُوَ بِمَزَحَّزِهِ مِنَ الْعَذَابِ. The objective of this life, my young friends, whether you live for a day or a moment, is to live in a state where you have pleased your Rabb and you've left with Iman. Subhanallah. Look how Allah, you're going to go. Would you like to die in a nightclub? Would you like to die whilst committing sin? Or would you like to die the way the Palestinians are dying? Look how Allah's honoring them. لَغَدْوَةٌ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَوْ رَوْحَةٌ خَيْرٌ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا وَمَا فِيهَا. A little morning, an hour in the morning or hour in the afternoon in the path of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ said, the dunya and everything within it cannot compete with it. The maqam that Allah is giving them, my young friends, my Nabi was a Nabi. There's no one that received a maqam greater than him. But this is something my Nabi desired. Not because this maqam is greater than the maqam of Nabuwwat, but it's to emphasize and show how great this maqam is that my Nabi desired. Only if I was made shaheed and then given life for a second time. And then Allah made me shaheed again. And then Allah gave me life for a third time and sent me back to the dunya. And I was made a shaheed again by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How many thousands, subhanallah, subhanallah. You know, you and I were to live. What maqam would we achieve with the way we're living our life, a life of disobedience, a life in which we can't even offer our prayer, a life in which we, look at ghair mahrams about 100,000 times a day. And like this, as you live, as you die, look how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is honoring. Look at the maqam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving them. They're leaving this world with Iman and in a state that Allah is pleased with, and look how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is honoring them. And thousands have gone like this, and those that haven't. For some of them, my young friends, sometimes Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith, إِنَّ الرَّجُلْ لِيُكُونَ لَهُ إِنَّ اللَّهِ الْمَنْزِلَةِ فَمَا يَبْلُغُ بِعَمَلٍ فَمَا زَالَ يَبْتَلِيهِ بِمَا يَبْتَلَهُ حَتَّى يَبْلُغُ إِيَّاهَا. Sometimes what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has destined, for example, Adam, Allah has destined that he should receive this great high rank in Jannah. Allah has destined this for him. But when you look at Adam, he's always chilling, whining, dining, doesn't even pray his namaz, doing this, doing that. When you look at his a'mal, he doesn't have the a'mal to take him to the highest maqam in Jannah, which Allah has reserved for him. So what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts him through difficulty. Allah puts him through difficulty, and the most merciful and the most kind also gives him the tawfiq to make sabr and to be steadfast. So Allah puts him through difficulty, and Allah helps him at the same time. Throughout this difficulty, Adam is still uttering, Raditu billahi rabba wa bil islami deena, and through this, Allah makes him worthy of that high maqam. And for these people will receive such a high maqam, my young friends, that people like yourself and myself, when we see the maqam that they've received on the day of judgment, we will say, Ya layta juludana qurizat bil maqarid fanu'ta mithal ma utu. Only if our skins were also cut with scissors and our skin was stripped, so that we could also receive the same maqam and award that these people have received. For some, my young friends, it will be a means of purification. The Prophet ﷺ said, مَا يُصِيبَ الْمُؤْمِنِ مِنْ نَصْبٍ وَلَا وَصْبٍ وَلَا حَمٍ وَلَا حُزْنٍ وَلَا غَمٍ حَتَّى الشَّوْكَ يُشَاكَ إِلَّا كَفَّرَ اللَّهُ بِهَا خَطَايَا. Any difficulty a believer experiences, even if it's tired. We came from Bradford today, we're tired. So that's tiredness. Whether it's tiredness, whether it's anxiety, whether it's grief, even if it's something small as a thorn, it pricks you. Allah, because of that difficulty that you experience, Allah will wipe away your sins. Like this, when you leave, because of these difficulties, Allah doesn't want to punish you in the akhirah. He purifies you in the dunya. So when you meet Him, you are pure. And there's no need for your Lord to punish you. Look at through the barakat of what's happening, how many people are making ruju to Allah. How difficult is tabligh? Ask the tablighi jamaat. They knock on doors by day and by night. And for years, try it yourself, giving dawah to people. You can go on and relate stories of the Anbiya, talk about the beautiful teachings of your Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, but it has no impact. The heart is hard and the heart is closed. Look at Hazrat Nuh Alayhi Salam, how long did he convey the message? 950 years. إني أعلنت لهم وأسررت لهم إسرارا إني دعوت قومي ليلا ونهارا فلم يزدهم دعائي إلا فرحا. How many people embrace Islam after 950 years? ما آمن معه إلا قليل, a handful. Subhanallah, subhanallah. Sometimes what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does, He brings about situation. You can invite somebody for 50 years, 100 years, he becomes deaf, dumb, blind to your call and cry, and he's not prepared to listen. And sometimes Allah brings about a little situation in his life. For example, he's had an accident, all of a sudden he wakes up. Somebody's died in his family, all of a sudden now this person doesn't leave the musalla. Look at, as a result of which, what's happened in the dunya, how many millions are turning towards Allah. Balki those that rejected Allah, didn't believe in Allah, how many of them in the hundreds have already declared the kalima? How many of them have started looking at the Quran? And how long before they declare the kalima? How many believers that had forgotten Allah and His Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, all of a sudden have realized their identity. They realize who they are. They realize who their loyalty should be. And how many thousands by the grace of Allah, how much today mashallah donated, how many are reading Quran for what's happening at this moment in time. So Allah eases the burden and the difficulty of the people of Palestinians. My young friends, it's this situation that's brought about this. And then by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, unity. How difficult is unity? Look at what the Quran says with regards to Rasulullah. Aws and Khazraj fought for how long? Allah is saying in the Quran, O Muhammad, لو أنفقت ما في الأرض جميعا ما ألفت بين قلوبهم. لو أنفقت ما في الأرض جميعا ما ألفت بين قلوبهم. If you spend everything within this universe, you could not have joined the hearts of Aus and Khazraj. ولكن الله ألف بينهم. Allah joined their hearts and make them one. You know how difficult a unity is, my young friends. We're divided in terms of qawmiyat. You'll have a Bengali masjid, you'll have a Pakistani masjid, you'll have Somali masjid. Then we're divided in terms of groups. You'll have Salafis, you'll have Madkhalis, you'll have Wahhabis, you'll have Sufis, you'll have Brelvis, you'll have Deobandis. Then we're, divided in terms of color. Then we're divided in one family. This is from this qawm, he's a Jat, he's a Baruchi, he's a Surti, he's from Silati, he's a Dak. Every month on an island we're by ourselves. And all these petty little things are breaking the ummah. By the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is bringing us close together. The issue of Palestine is uniting the Muslims, and we're realizing the importance of unity, and we've stopped squabbling and fighting over petty little differences. These are just some of the things that have come about as this conflict. My friends, there's a lot more to come, and there's a lot more to happen. This is just the beginning. In years to come, you will see much, my young friends. My take, this is just the beginning. Allah's cleansing the believers. It's when the believers are cleansed. The Sahaba, before they embraced Islam, what were they? What did they used to do? Bury their own daughters alive. But when they embrace Islam, al-Islamu yahdimu ma kana qabla. It demolishes all the gunas before it, and they were cleansed. No power within this universe could stand before the Iman. Once the believers have been cleansed, believe me, my young friends, there will nothing that will stand before them. Palestine will be free. And on this note, I will conclude. May Allah accept these humble efforts of yours in listening to this message, and may Allah make this a source of rahmah and barakah, and it's good that you lot did. And Allah, through the barakat of this, Allah ease the suffering of the believers in every corner of the globe. And Allah please every single one of us with the state of the believers by bringing about the victory which we all desire whenever my Master sees fit. And on this note, I'm going to conclude.